Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi paid a visit to Lethbridge this week to make his annual appearance in the Whoop Up Days parade. But before the parade, he dropped by our studios to discuss some of the top issues on the minds of Albertans. And while data centers and referendums are, of course, top of mind, his discussion with our Landon Hickok started off with preparation for what tends to be a very long walk in the parade.
Naheed, you're here in Lethbridge. There's obviously a number of things happening across our province, but of course, this week I know you're here for a fact for Whoop Up Days. So just how excited are you for this week's event, and just what does this event mean to you to come each and every year?
I love it, and I will tell you, I am lucky enough to have traveled all over the world, but nothing beats a Lethbridge sunset. And I haven't had enough time here this summer just because everything that's happening. So I wanted to make a real point to come for Whoop Up Days. But we're filming this the night before the parade. And I need to share something with you. I have been in parades all over the province. This one is long and it goes very fast. And my deal is I walk in the parade. There's always an opportunity for me to jump in the back of the truck, but I like to walk and talk to people. So my critical dilemma tonight is, do I wear the cowboy boots?
Oh, that's a real dilemma there.
I mean, I'm from Calgary. They're pretty well broken in, but that parade goes fast. So it'll be a game time decision.
You walked here before, I suppose?
I have.
So you have experience.
I have. So I think it'll be a game time decision in the morning on whether or not the cowboy boots come out. But
all right, then.
You know, I'm saying that now, but I will always try my best to wear the cowboy boots. And by the way, yes, I think all summer, I have never actually jumped into the back of the truck. I've walked them all. So let's see how I do today.
You guys have been touring, or are in the process of touring this province, really consulting the public about the development of AI data centers across our province. Now, we had some recent developments and that we could touch on that later, but just what have you been hearing from just people around the province and like their concerns, maybe even some of their what they're excited about these data centers, just about what you've been hearing?
Yeah, let's take a half step back. So the UCP has been talking about data centers as their primary economic development strategy for almost 3 years. And we've been raising questions about this, and Albertans have been raising questions about this for quite some time. Questions around where should they go? How close should they be to people's homes? Should they go on prime agricultural land? What impact will they have on people's electrical bills? Because we've seen in the US that they use so much electricity that people's overall electricity bills can spike. What about water? Especially here in southern Alberta, where we've been living through drought for so long. You know, one of these hyperscale data centers can use as much water as the city of Edmonton. One project. They can use as much electricity as the city of Calgary or more. One project. So these are huge projects, and what really surprised me is that Premier Smith and the UCP have been talking about this for 3 years, but they hadn't actually written any rules. They hadn't actually written any regulations. And they hadn't done any public consultation at all. So during the Calgary Stampede, the Premier announced this Meta project in the industrial heartland in Sturgeon County. And it was very well designed, the announcement. It was at the beginning of the Calgary Stampede. The whole point was, as she went through her Stampede stuff, people would hoist her up on their shoulders as a hero about this amazing project. And I think the government was very surprised to then hear about the very real concerns of Albertans because they hadn't talked to the public at all. So we decided that we would do a series of these town halls across the province over the last couple of weeks to really hear from Albertans. And we are sincerely and legitimately on a listening tour. The last of these is a virtual town. We might end up doing more, but the last of them scheduled for now is a virtual town hall, which is on Wednesday after the Whoop Up Days parade, and people are really welcome. You can go to albertandpcaucus.ca and learn about how to log in, but you're very welcome to join. We've got a few hundred people already registered for that. Now, the funny thing about this politically, and then I'll get to what people are saying, the funny thing about this politically is when we announced our tour, the Premier's chief of staff went on a rant on social media going, "You hate investment, why would you ever do this? This is crazy." And then after we had our first event in Sturgeon County and so many people, it was actually in St. Albert, and so many people came, they launched their own series of tours. He never did apologize or delete that first tweet. But what is interesting about this is that we're there to listen. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen from what the UCP is doing, Premier Smith put out a video saying data centers are awesome, and if you have questions, you're just misinformed. So we're there listening. They're there haranguing Albertans saying, why don't you agree with us? And I will tell you that I've been very clear at the beginning of these town halls, the ones that I've been at, that we want to hear from everybody. And if you feel like you have a minority view in the room, don't be scared, don't be shy. If you need to do it in writing, you can do it in writing. But we're all neighbors, and we're going to get through this together, and we want to hear from you whether you're pro or whether you're anti.
Let's move on. Of course, data center has always been a talking point for the last number of years. Another main talking point across this province is the upcoming referendum in October. I know you and your party have voiced your displeasure against many of the reasonings behind it, but as we're now 2 months away from this, are you guys doing any work to prepare for it, doing any work to educate Albertans? What have you guys been doing?
So much work. I did not have Save Canada on my summer to-do list. I wanted to talk about healthcare and data centers and economic development and the cost of living and jobs, but here we are. And what's particularly frustrating about this is just how reckless it is. I was talking to a senior cabinet minister, I just ran into her, a senior UCP cabinet minister at an event recently. And I just said, how's your summer going? I love politicians' summer. And I've been in every corner of the province talking to people about the referendum, organizing, and so on and so on. And remember that the government ostensibly is in favor of the Remain in Canada side. And she said, I pretty much just took the summer off. There's no election coming, so next year I'll be out there and doing those events. And I was like, but there's a referendum. First of all, who takes the summer off at a politician? That's this busy time. But more important, there is a referendum in 2 months. So what we know is that the government is not lifting a finger to help the Remain side. It's our job. It's fallen upon the New Democrats, as well as many other great community organizations like Thomas Lukaszik's Forever Canadian and others, to make the case for Canada. We didn't ask for this fight. This was put upon us. But I will tell you the thing that I am most worried about is the thing that I hear every day, which is, Naheed, why are you so worked up about this? The separatists are a small minority. They're never going to win. Well, you and I are sitting here in Lethbridge, and the voter turnout in the municipal election this past fall in Lethbridge was 19%. We know that the separatists are polling between 15 and 22, 23%. And we know every single one of them is going to vote. They're so motivated. They will crawl over glass to vote. And if others say, well, they're just a small minority and I'm not worried about this, we could end up with a shocking result. That's what happened with Brexit. A lot of people woke up the morning after the Brexit referendum and said, geez, I should have voted. I should have got my mom to vote. So my job is to get out the vote. My job is to encourage everyone to vote, encourage everyone to get others out to vote. And frankly, I've never done this before, but I'm encouraging people to get a mail-in ballot, because Elections Alberta has said this will be the most complicated election they've ever run. When you go to the polls, you're going to get 10 separate pieces of paper. They need to hire 60,000 people. The referendum will cost somewhere between $130 and $180 million just to run. It costs about $200 million to the economy in total, not including all of the investment that's been scared away. Alberta's unemployment is now at maritime levels. It's the highest outside of the Maritimes, because people are not investing in Alberta because of this talk of separation. And then there's the other 9 questions. The other 9 questions, frankly, are a political strategy from the Premier of separation in slow motion. They're asking for things that are illegal and unconstitutional. They will almost certainly be turned back by the courts if they're tried. Refugee children should not have access to public education. Immigrants should have a waiting period before they can access public health care, never mind that they might have a communicable disease. But I think the Premier actually wants these to be turned back, so she can say, look, Albertans voted for this and Ottawa's not giving it to us, let's have another separation referendum. This is the Parti Québécois playbook that they've been using in Quebec for 60 years. And let me tell you, Quebec has seen 60 years of economic decline. So perhaps they've negotiated some concessions from the federal government, but maybe that's $1 for $100 of investment that is left. It's a game that only benefits politicians. It doesn't benefit real people. So my long story short, and my message is, get a mail-in ballot if you're worried and you don't want to stand in line for many hours on election day. Order that now. Make sure you have valid ID because they're making it harder for people to vote through their changes as well. And get out there and vote and bring everyone you know to vote. It's important that people who love Canada, as I do, vote in big numbers, and don't use this to send a message to Ottawa. It's not going to work. It's never worked. Use this to send a message to Danielle Smith.
And speaking of elections, it wasn't that long ago you announced that in the next provincial election, you will commit to run for a seat back in Calgary, your stomping grounds. Just what was your decision behind that, and just what does it mean to, I guess, for Edmonton Strathcona in the process?
So it was kind of a personal and a political decision. So I had run in Edmonton Strathcona, which is an amazing place, and I am so grateful to the people of Edmonton Strathcona for welcoming me the way they did, with a huge mandate. But the reason I ran there is because that's where the vacancy was. And I didn't want to cause another by-election and the cost of another by-election when there was a vacancy. And people knew that. I was certainly not shy about that. And I've been thrilled to be the MLA for Edmonton Strathcona. It really is one of the best places in Alberta. But politically, I'll give you the political and the personal. Politically, I believe that a leader should win additional seats for their party, rather than run in a super safe seat, especially if it's a super safe seat that they don't happen to live in or have a history in. So politically, it makes a ton of sense for me to run in Calgary, which is where my political base is, and win another seat for us in Calgary, because we've got a very narrow opposition versus government majority right now. So it's a matter of 6 seats, and I'd rather win one of those seats. But there's also a personal thing, which is I was the mayor of Calgary for 11 years. I grew up in Calgary, in Northeast Calgary. I've always thought of myself as someone who wants to represent his neighbors. And I know it sounds a bit silly, but there's something in it that says, if I'm going to be the premier of Alberta, I'd like to also be representing my own neighbors.
And speaking of elections, again, another piece of breaking news I just came across is Premier Smith calling a by-election in Calgary Shaw for September 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's right.
Just what are your thoughts behind that, and do we have an idea of any nominations?
Yeah, so I lost the pool, I'm sorry to say, because I actually thought they wouldn't call the by-election quickly, but I'm thrilled to do it. We have been door knocking with our extraordinary candidate, Kyle Campbell, for months now. We have thousands of identified voters in Calgary Shaw already. Meanwhile, Danielle Smith's preferred candidate in the UCP nomination side lost. And the person who was nominated is affiliated with a bunch of extremists. He says he's not a separatist, but we know that a lot of separatists supported him in that nomination. And he is affiliated with a bunch of sort of very extreme political characters in Calgary. So Calgary Shaw is considered to be one of the 2 or 3 safest conservative seats in Calgary. And I think that we will have an upset and we will have a big surprise. I got to tell you, our candidate, Kyle Campbell, he's a dad, he's a coach, he lives in the neighborhood, he grew up in the neighborhood, he has religious background, a faith community in the neighborhood, and he himself is a survivor of cancer. And he's had a very bad experience with the UCP's version of public health care. He's a compelling guy, and I think he will be an extraordinary MLA, and in the next general election, an extraordinary member of an NDP government.
That is Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi in conversation with BCN's Landon Hickok.